Dr. Monte grew up in a family business in Albuquerque and now resides in Santa Fe. Edward, in his career, a 40-year career in the East Coast, is a psychotherapist that developed a highly successful consulting practice for family businesses and family offices. His practice concentrated on parent-child relationships and the issues that they involve that impact family businesses. For 18 years plus, Edward taught at the Next Generation Leadership Institute within the Family Business Center of Quinlan School of Business at Loyola University, Chicago. I could go on for quite a few minutes with regard to all of his background and credentials and accolades, but I personally would like to hear what he has to say today, and I'm sure you would too. Thank you. Edward?
Well, the joy of being introduced by Jim Parker is that Jim, at one point, was my dad's attorney when I was a kid. So there's a long history with this man who saved us a lot of money and a lot of grief, particularly in our family. It's 3 o'clock. Are you guys still okay and awake and eat popcorn? And I have about 45 minutes in which, during which I am going to give you the entire history of developmental psychology for the individual and all the major components of family therapy, and then weave those into how they impact family business, ending with succession, legacy, and old age. So just hold on, and we can do it. We can do it. I'll leave out 99% of everything you need to know. With Dennis, who's an old colleague, old is the operative word we were just saying. We're still at it. There is a bias here, and it's a lens, and I do greatly appreciate whatever this panel said, half of which I don't understand, but it was brilliant and wonderful, and I love them for it. My bias is that family businesses are primarily families, and it's interesting they're in business together, but when I look at it, I begin, as I did at the very beginning, to say to myself that family businesses are about as successful as families are successful. And they're about as healthy as a family is healthy. It doesn't mean a crazy family can't run a really good business. And they can be in chaos, but the business is okay, that it will run. The question is, will it thrive? And then when you heard the statistic of a third transition, will it actually be there in the next generation or two? And I have worked with over many, many years with family businesses where the family is quite crazy, clinical word, and the business has gone on for 27 generations and they have more money than God, and you just go, okay, well, you really should look at these issues, but if you don't, it's okay, you'll still be rich and I'll go home. So that's there, that's an exception. I would say that the vast majority of businesses that fail do not fail because you're not good at business. You have access to brilliant consultants who can really help you on the business side, and you built the business, you've stewarded the business, you've maintained the business. It's not that, it's just that you don't like your sister. You can't stand your cousin, you thought that dad liked your sister better. All the reasons in which it begins to unravel. Now I have another bias, which I will apologize for up front, which is I do know that very healthy parents can have very dysfunctional children. Genetics are a huge component, addictions, influences, I get that. But I do consistently lay the health on the family at the feet of the upper generation. My feeling is, again, a business is only as healthy as a family, and then the bias is that the family, for the most part, and I'll underline for the most part, is about as healthy as the parents are healthy. So what sort of children have they raised? What sort of children are they continuing to raise? How do they launch their children? How do they empower their children? What do they do throughout the life cycle? Okay, and that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at what is the life cycle of two things. One, the individual, and the second, the family or the system. And the family and the system in this case is a family business. So the goal is that we raise healthy children, which means children who know themselves, feel comfortable in their own skin, are empowered, feel they have a voice, and have a great deal of respect and empathy for the broader picture. And they belong to the broader unit. And you know automatically if you're in a family business, there is something that's far bigger than any individual within the family business. Most people, when Dennis said it's really hard to put together a family team. Well, you all know from experience, it's really hard putting together a family. Most people aren't crazy enough to try it. They all leave home and they see their parents every 2 weeks, for 2 weeks, every, maybe 6 months or so, and the parents go visit, but after 4 days, they want to get out of there. And that's how the majority of the population live. You all decided, let's work together and be around each other all the time. And it's like, oh my God, that's really tough. It is really tough, but it's heroic. And it is because of what Dennis said, out of love, that you do it. And it's something to remember, because there's no other reason to do it. Ego, maybe, but that wears thin. It's got to be because you love the people around you and you want to take care of them. And they do it out of love and respect for you, to honor you, your legacy, and where you're going. So that's the ideal reason. Now, again, I'm not sure that that's the majority of people in family business. The lack of passion, the lack of identity is a problem. But let's start from the beginning. There's 3 things you need to know about development of individual children, and it's a schema that's very black and white, but let's just do it. From 0 to about 18 months, an infant needs to know that it is worthwhile as a person because it gets taken care of. It's very simple. You take care of an infant, you smile, you interact, they feel worthwhile. You leave them, you don't take care of them consistently, they don't have a good sense of who they are. So by 18 months, that infant should be trusting that they have some value in the world. 18 months to about 3, as you all know if you have these age kids, it's about power. So they can grab your glasses and take it off of you, and they laugh hysterically because they can push the water bottle, they can say no, they have some power. So we start with a positive identity that I'm worthwhile. We move to a sense that I have power and influence in my world. And then from about 3 to the rest of their lives, but maybe 3 to about 5 to 6, the task of parenting is about building a conscience. So the same child that grabs your glasses and breaks them at 2 and laughs hysterically. Remember that YouTube thing about the little boy puts his finger in his brother's mouth? What's his name? Charlie. His little boy puts his finger in his little brother's mouth, and Charlie, the little brother, just bites it, and he starts screaming. He's a very sweet kid. Screams, and Charlie thinks that's the funniest thing ever, that he just hurt his brother. He was 2, right? From 3 to 5, if the child grabbed your glasses, you should burst into tears, get angry, something, so they know that their power is there, but they now have to have empathy for your needs as well. So we have sense of self that's good, that we have power, influence in the world, and we have a conscience. Those are the 3 things you need to know about in developmental psychology. And if you think about yourself, anyone in this room, all your good friends, any family member, one of those 3, or 2 of those 3, or 3 of those 3 life cycle stages were not adequately lived through. Someone doesn't have a really good sense that they're valuable just by sitting there. They don't have to do anything. Infants just sit there and everyone coos and laughs and thinks they're wonderful. You should know that you have value whether you do something or not. So the ones that walk around going, I don't know if I'm really worth anything, got a good shot that developmental phase got screwed up. The one that has sense of power, well, the one that walks around going, well, I don't know if I really can do that, and I really can't, and I'm going to screw up, and I really don't know if I have that sort of influence, something might have happened in that phase. Third phase is the one that has no conscience, no empathy. They don't care if they hurt you. They can't relate. Okay? And those are the people that, of course, go around hurting people a lot, and succeeding or not, but they're very scary people. And the goal here, and it's a word Dennis used earlier, is differentiation. Differentiation means that you want to raise a child who can stand with one's parent, can feel very solid in who they are, And if you stop there and say they can stand next to a parenting figure and say, no, this is what I believe, well, any 2-year-old can do that. Any 15-year-old who's oppositional can do that. So the key in raising a child at the end of the day is the ability to feel good about oneself, have power, my ability to say no, and empathy or a conscience that says, Dad, I really don't agree with you, but I would never want to hurt you. I want to hear from you, and I want you to hear me. And at the end of the day, I probably won't agree with everything, but I want to be respectful and loving, but I want to know where my boundary is between you and me. That's a healthy kid. Now, if we look around the room and said, how many of us can do that? Maybe 1 or 2. You know, there's some guy in Ohio that can do that. Most of us can do it with good friends. Most of us can do it not with parenting figures, which is, again, why, by the way, most people don't work with their parents, because it's hard enough when you project your parent onto your boss. But in your day-to-day world with peers, we look much more differentiated than we are. Remember when you went away to college, you went away and you felt all grown up and you came back in to the household and within 3 minutes you're 15 and the dynamics are back in place. Well, that's because you're not differentiated. But it's a goal. It's not an actuality. It's a goal that's going to happen at some point before you die. And it happens in different phases and levels for everybody. At the same time, when they look at what is healthy for a system or a family, there's countless books on what makes a healthy family. For my money, what makes a healthy family are 2 things. One is flexibility, and the other is permeability. So flexibility is, how do we interact that changes as we grow? You know, the standard definition of a stuck family is a family that interacts with their children at age 8 in the same way they interact with their children at age 48. And you've met those families. So no one's allowed to grow. The family's not allowed to grow. The children interact with their parents, you know, as they did when they were 8, not allowing their parents to grow the heck up, so that the 78-year-old dad is not the 35-year-old dad they were raised by. He's this old guy that may be sweeter than he was at 35, certainly less stressed. And you go, well, where's the 35-year-old that pissed me off? And who's this old 80-year-old who wants me to be nice to him and talk about feelings? I don't get this. You know, so we don't let them, we being, I should do it the other way, guys who are younger don't let their parents grow up, and parents don't let their kids grow up. And that's a very difficult thing in families, regardless of family business. All right? So then you begin to understand as you go that if the job of an individual child is to really learn who they are as part of a family unit, and then launch and know who they are apart from a family unit, what happens when we say, usually around 20 to 30, when that dynamic is at its height, hey, come on into the family business. Hey, regress and come back and be 10 years old and work with me and forget that you're an adult and I'm going to teach you my business. I have another bias, which is we use the word family business a lot. And over 30 some years, I've discovered that about half the businesses I work with are not family businesses. They're usually dad's business and he lets everybody else work in it. You know, they're really not family businesses. They're not truly family businesses until there's cooperation, collaboration. And that's a tough one. We'll talk about why. All right? So we want to begin to assess, where are the kids in our families? Where is our family developmentally? What are our expectations for that? And then how, by virtue of putting a kid in a family business, or a parent, not only having to be a parent, but a boss, can really mess up the natural growth of any healthy family. It can really make it difficult. One example I always use is, how many in here call their parents by their first name in the business? Yeah, which is really good because you want to feel grown up. When they do a few side studies with vendors, they go, isn't that creepy? She calls her dad by his first name. Like, I don't know that's her dad. But it's this weird thing of, how do you stand with your parents and not look like saying, hey, Daddy, can I do X? But then when you say, hey, Ralph, what can I do? Everyone goes, she calls her dad Ralph. That's weird. She's looking like, it's a hard one, but it reflects how complicated this can be. So let's start with, what are the transitional phases going into a family business. And the biggest one, and I think really the only one that we all talk about, and it certainly gives us that do advising our business, is the word succession. What's going to go from one generation to the next, and when do you start? And I would say the Armstrong family started maybe with the babies on the stage. That's starting succession. Succession should start when the kids are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Should not start when they're 48, 49, and you're 80, and now we're going to talk about whether or not you're good enough to take over the business. It's what is that first acknowledgement for those of you in a family business? I was in a 4th generation family business. When was the first acknowledgement that we have a family business that people actually know about? That you stand on a stage and people applaud you because you're doing something remarkable with this thing we call the business. I was 6 and they put up billboards all over town for a business. And I went, what's that? And it sort of hit me that there was something bigger than just my dad was at that store or that restaurant. It was like, oh, there's a business, there's a name. It was just remarkable. Terrified me, but it was remarkable. So the first question I'd ask is, when was your first realization that you're part of something that known, that big, that important? Because that's the beginning of the succession plan. And then have you been raised with that? And in what way, over how many years? So the other part of the succession plan is when you come home from the office or the work, how do you talk about it? What are you teaching your kids about the joys of coming to work for you? You know, and it's all those generations of millennials and all. Although, was anyone else bothered by the fact that we're at Generation Z? Does Robert know something about the last generation? That was a little, like, what do they? That sort of got me. What do we do? Swing back, or does he know something we don't? But anyway, for this last generation, how do you encourage them to come in? Because there's, you know, as most of you know, everyone goes, you can be whatever you want, sweetheart. You want to be a shepherd or a ballerina? Absolutely. The fact we have a $10 million company here that maybe you could work in, we don't talk about whatever you want. And then Penelope ends up with, I don't know what a Shakespearean theology degree is, but you end up with those sort of kids that go, well, why was there encouraged there? Why wasn't I encouraged to look at the business? And we'll talk about how. But how was a succession plan presented when the kids are 8, 12, 15, 20? Does it look like fun? Does adulthood look like fun? Does marriage look like fun? What are you presenting to the kids? Because they will hear you, as someone said earlier today. They're watching. And if the family business is only a source of great pain and stress, they'll run the other way. They're not going to want to do it. They're going to want to not be you. They'll grow out of that a bit, but they'll want to not be you. So then we look at that phase where they enter the business. And I've already said where that can really mess someone up, because most kids enter between 25 and 35 at a time where making their mark in the world. And for years, the thing was have your kids go work for the competitor or someone else. And then they started tracking that, and you lost a lot of kids out of family businesses. Because when they went to work for the competitor in Houston, and then the competitor had a daughter, and then they married the daughter, or they had a lot, they didn't come back. So it's like, maybe we should rethink this, launching the kids by having them go elsewhere, but really start to think about who are they as people so that we can honor that. But at the very beginning, do we talk to them about the entrance and what it feels like to go from being your daughter to being your employee? And at that point, I will say, most kids do not see the family business in their gut while they're standing there as my business. It's your business, I work in it. So it's very disconcerting. It is clearly mom and dad's business, grandfather, grandmother's business. It's not mine. And having been there, it's not mine, it's yours. So entering is a real tax on self-identity. Am I good enough? Am I okay? Who am I? Now I'm just one more cog in the wheel. I don't have any sense of who Edward is. I'm now just a Monte. This is weird. All my friends are growing and they're working for companies and they're watching out for themselves and they're on their 3rd job, and I'm in a family business. I've been there for 10 years and I'm going nowhere, and I'm not even a person somehow. I'm just a son of a family business. I don't know if you know this, when they ask men in the workforce, what do you do? they'll say, I'm an engineer. When you ask a family business son, what do? He says, I'm in a family business. Doesn't even say what he does. Then he'll say what he does. But he identifies first as part of this larger piece. So you have to watch coming into the entering part of it. How do you talk about that? And we'll talk about talking in a minute. The next thing is learning the business and realizing that most people have watched the business from afar and now you're in it and you need to really understand it and you really need to know how do things work. So that again sort of reduces you back to a student who needs to learn, and parents rush and make sure they learn all the divisions and how to be good managers and operations people, and all of that's amazingly good, and that's where they should be. Despite the new generation saying, I don't unload boxcars. Yes, you do for now, and you'll work your way up, and then you'll run this, and then you'll run that. The downside of that model is most people stop there. I'm working with a family right now. The kids are 45 to 50. They're brilliant managers, but they're not owners. They're managers because the next thing hasn't happened. The next thing is emotional ownership of that business. When, after working in a business, do you begin to feel that it transitions from being a family business, which it will always be, to being the family business, but also a piece of me belongs to it. It belongs to me. When do I emotionally think, if you lean back on that chair, that's my chair, and it's in our family business, and don't you be breaking my chair? Versus, well, I don't care, it's a chair. No, that's my chair in my family business. And that's a huge step developmentally. Usually comes a little bit before midlife. Late 30s for women, early 40s for men, where they begin saying, what do I own emotionally? For those that don't, you can't go to the next phase. And the next phase is contributing to the business and making a mark that is truly and uniquely yours. I work with families, as Dennis I know does as well, where we'll work with someone who's run a business for 35, 40 years, which is clear he's running his grandfather's business. He's a steward. He's just maintaining it. There's nothing creative. There's nothing unique. Now, the good news, which is to comfort the panel that just happened, lots of studies on how genetically talents, abilities, worldview, how the brain gets passed on, tends to skip a generation. So you'll often see a dynamic founder followed up by a steward of a child. Now, how much of that is dynamics, where the founder wouldn't allow someone to step up to them, so they raise children that are subservient, but they also found they don't quite have the ability, who then give birth to this woman who has the brain of her grandfather and can run the whole place. But they tend not to get to that generation. So that's another piece, which is genetically watch the grandchildren. They tend to have more in common with the grandparents than the parents, which is sort of cool. It's also annoying if they have the same personality structure. Because if you didn't get along with your dad, you now have a daughter who's just like him and you want to kill both of them and you're stuck in the middle. But it's still exciting for the family business, you know? So you want to make it your own after you own it. And then all these processes of moving in transition to take over the business get smacked in the face by the upper generation. And this is where I want to spend most of my time going forward, which is where does succession, where does that transition fall apart? Because you've raised good kids, you've brought them into the business, they've worked the business and learned it. You've hopefully allowed them to learn more than how to work in the business and have started to take them to meetings with the bankers and the lawyers and show them how to run the business. So now they're getting all these skills. They've had years of experience. So all this is ideal, right? And then what happens? And then mom or dad, mostly dad, says, well, don't think you're going to take over the business. I ain't going anywhere. Because this is where the big secret is. I'm part of this forum in Chicago for many years, and I'm heading a legacy institute we're putting in for mostly men, because businesses are still run mostly by men. But men, we have one woman and about 7 men now who are facing retirement or change. So the Legacy Institute, and they put me in charge of it because I'm old, said, you go do it because you're aware of this, and I just sold my practice in Philadelphia, so I get it. And they said, what happens in succession? And what's succession about? And what's retirement, whatever that might look like, about? And as we sat with advisory groups for about 2 or 3 weeks, I was getting more and more annoyed. Because the advisory groups were like a marketing firm that shows you people of old age on Medicare. The woman on TV goes, I'm 64 years old. I have a full life ahead of me. And she looks great and she's hiking and she's in great, it's like, honey, you're 64 years old. You don't have a full life ahead. You have a life ahead of you, but you don't have no full life ahead of you. You're just old. So we go back and go, okay, if you think about, if you just go with your economic class of people and your health care accessibility, women in this room should live to about 80, 82. Men, 76. So for the older people in this room, figure out your age. Now tell me how many summers you have left. Not a lot. And that's if you just go full out and drop dead on Tuesday, healthy as anything. You don't know that if you're going to live to 80, you might be infirmed at 74 or 76. So the idea that succession gets screwed up, sorry for the language, it gets screwed up because the upper generation really doesn't want to look at the hidden little secret underneath succession, which is you're going to be dead. They talk about in the Legacy Institute the 3rd chapter. I just did a talk there on the 3rd chapter, and I said the ugly little secret is there isn't a 4th chapter. At the end of this phase, you're dead. You're not going to go on to something better. So now's the time to sort of really dig in and figure out a lot of things. And I hate saying that because most people, like you, are in great shape and they get up every morning and they run 30 miles and it's like, stop, you're 70, you're going to break a hip, sit down. What do it's like, no, I'm really 50, I just have gray hair. The Mertzes, really 70. And, when you start thinking about you've done nothing, I will say in response to that family, it's like, sounds like the kids and the parents have a lot in common. The parents haven't saved, the kids have no life. What's going on with both generations in that family that seems to have not planned? And whichever person on the panel said, plan when the kids are 8. Start your retirement plan when you're 20, not when you're 70, because you don't have any more time. So we have to look at how do you transition a family, and don't think you're going to start it at 70 and it's going to be that successful. And then how do we think about legacy? And legacy is very important because it is, how do you want to be remembered? How do you want to have your family be remembered? And that is really not about a good eulogy. Grandpa was a total horses, but we'll say nice things at the funeral and we'll feel better and we'll go home and that's it. Well, no, a legacy is how did he live, and however he lived and how he led the family got integrated and digested in the family. So if he didn't care about the community, the business doesn't care about the community. A legacy is not a mission statement on the wall that no one lives. The legacy is how have you lived over 30 years, and how will you be remembered? Now, I always say the good news is there's the Ebenezer Scrooge, caveat that you can change that at the end. If you've been a total horses, whatever, you really can on Christmas morning wake up and start repairing that pretty quickly. But you better start now because you don't know how many more Christmases you have. So a lot of work I do with executives and YPO and family business is to look at them and go, you're old. What do you want from me? You're old. Developmentally, we used to say that, old age started at 60, now it's up to about 66, 67, it's now called older adulthood. Well, the word old is still in there. It's not like we have tons of time left. So it's, can we get going now? And it doesn't mean you have to sit in a rocking chair. It doesn't mean you have to leave your business. If you look at mortality rates of entrepreneurs versus people with pensions, entrepreneurs have about a 6-year mortality rate if they don't do something. So go play golf, but you better be running that golf course soon after, or you're going to get depressed, opportunistic diseases. You're going to drop dead over about 6 years. People that worked really tough jobs, cops, teachers, firemen, people at GM in the factory, they get a pension check every month that says, or every 2 weeks it goes, this is your reward for all the hell you put up with. And they live to about 140. Entrepreneurs don't. Okay? And we're talking mostly in gender, because I think the big thing to point out again and again is we're talking mostly about men. We're talking that in this culture, despite how enlightened we've become, men in this room, you are valued for how much you produce, not for much else. So if you're really wealthy and you've done well in your business, there isn't a neighbor that's not going to say, wow, look at him and what a great family man he provides. If you're the sweetest guy in the room and you make $20,000 a year, the neighbors are going to say, oh, his poor wife. He's a nice guy, but really? No. So you're valued for what you produce. So men produce a family business. And someone said, really, they take care of their business before their kids. Yes, because the business is their core identity. Men will eat their young before they're going to let the business go anywhere. Because it's not because we're evil, it's because that's the only identity I really have, is what I've produced. So when you say, let's retire, men fall apart, or say, I'm never retiring. Well, they're never going to retire because they don't want to become irrelevant. They don't want to slowly die. Where women, as someone said today, are valued for their nurturance and for the ability to raise children who will launch. So you look at retirement of females in family business and transition and succession. It's brilliant. I've told this story, I did a keynote here years ago, told this story, John's heard it a million times, which is my dad died. We went to the, walnut paneled office. The lawyer opens up the book and we all found out what we got or didn't get. It was like some bad 1930s movie. My mother, if you walked into her house and you picked up anything on a chair and you went, what's this? Your name was on the back of it. She would say, look, we have to go over the books. Every time you showed up, you have to go over the books. So when she died, we were like sick of it. We knew exactly what we were going to get because she wanted you to launch and be better. Where my dad was, this is all I have. And despite I'm not thinking this way, it's sort of competing with you. It's the idea of top-down decision-making for kids that men do everywhere, right? How do men run businesses? They sit in their office by themselves, they think big thoughts, they get a couple advisors who are going to agree with them, and then they pronounce what's going to happen. Women devised think tanks. Where'd think tanks come from? The men were at war. Women were running the factories. They had no power. So they all got together, they thought together, they came up with an idea, they got the one guy who had a bad hip so he wasn't at war, and they sent him in to the boss and said, this is what we'd like to do. So women do collaborate because it's the only way you gain power. So they've always done that, and it's brilliant. So what happens when we start saying to men, you have to cooperate? Well, we see cooperation as loss. We don't see cooperation as gain. So it's like, yes, what we need to do is communicate more fully. And then try that with your dad or your grandfather who goes, why would I have to do that? I never had to do that. I'll just tell you what to do. Sort of the paternal, maternal thing is staying safe in my own power base. I was a couples therapist for years, and my big standard line is, do not confuse being a parent with being an adult. Being a parent is not an adult role. Being a parent is, I'm going to give you a bowl of cereal, I'm going to take care of you, and it's a one-way street. And you have no obligation to give me a bowl of cereal. I'm going to give it to you. Well, if you try that in a relationship, maybe you have, I have, where I'm going to just take care of you and I'm going to diminish you as a child, that child will grow up. That child will hate you. Your sex life will go in the toilet because you know what you're not supposed to do with your children. So if you've made him or her your child, ooh, what are you going to do with that person? So what you want to start thinking about is if you're only interacting with people around you as a parent, you're not interacting as an adult. Adulthood and adult relationships are about one thing, primarily, reciprocity. I'm going to give you a bowl of cereal, you give me a bowl of cereal, and we're going to keep count. And I've given you 3 bowls of cereal and you only give me 1, I will probably divorce you or at least hate you. So we're going to keep score here on some level, and we're going to keep this balanced, or it's all going to go south. And that's what begins to happen in true succession in a family business. We go from being father or mother and daughter or son with this to begin looking more like adults, not adults. You're never going to be them, but like adults. So you take care of them, they take care of you, and that reciprocity has to grow. So a true succession plan is, what do you want? I would like to do this with the business. and then turn to your dad or mom and go, and what would you like? Well, I'd like to still be active, and I'd like to run this division, and then we can talk about it. But the question is the mostly patriarch able to talk? Never trained to. And we said in our advisors group, the only time I've really seen a quick change in a patriarch to talk is when they're vulnerable. Mom has died, he just had cancer, something happened in the business, his sister died. Something has to be catastrophic where they're feeling somewhat vulnerable. And then they might start opening up. The flip side is, will the kids take the risk of treating dad or mom as though they're adults and not dad and mom? So when do you as kids avoid asking, so how are you? Were you scared in that meeting today? Would you ever ask a personal question of your parent as you would a friend? And then when they go, we don't talk about that, go, no, we're going to talk about that. Now, who does that with their parents? But an adult should start to do that with parents. And if parents are healthy enough, it includes self-reflection to go, well, maybe I should open up and say something. So it's how do we get to the point where people will start to talk about real things? And the real sort of checkpoint of that is if you're in a healthy relationship, either peer or parent-child, there should be a point where real things are talked about. Can we talk about your death? Can we talk about how frightened I am of being irrelevant in my own business? Can I talk about the fact that I don't think you're the brightest bulb in the box, but you have these amazing credentials and amazing abilities over here that we need to develop, but I don't think you're going to be good running this division. Can we have those discussions? And those discussions only come with the sense of your breath being sucked out of you. You know, it's one of those incredible conversations at the end of, and it's not screaming, yelling, you're exhausted. It's not a debate about who would be better in this job. It's more, how do you feel? And what are you doing? And what do you want? And both have to take part. So when we talk about communication between generations, for me it's not communication. It's like couples would come to me and say, teach us how to talk to each other. Really? You don't know how to talk to each other? I mean, that's supposed to be your friend. How you doing? What's going on? Love you. That's talking to someone. Why don't you talk to them? Because you don't want to hear things. Because you think if you talk to someone, it's only going to be bad. How many people do you know in your family go, can we talk? And they go, oh God. Because they know it's going to be something bad versus, yay, we get to talk and let's see where it goes and we can resolve something. That's the goal. And 90% of us, absolutely including me, despite what I do for a living, someone says, you want to talk? I go, oh geez, what, please, no. It's going to be a nightmare. And then you get into it and you go, oh, not so bad. But with the Mertzes, wouldn't it be nice if someone said to Doolittle, you really don't have it. You don't have what it takes to run a business. Boy, are you a great operations guy. Are you a great salesperson? That's your talent. And begin to respect the talent that's there, but not tell the kid they can do everything and set them up for failure. Or, I forgot who said it today, it's just the idea of what is a family business? Should it be respectful of the next generation? I come from 4 brothers who came from Italy to Albuquerque. 3 of the brothers, they're all family businesses. 3 of the brothers, family businesses, have succeeded or not. The 4th brother, every generation, they look at the kids and go, so what are you interested in? Well, we're selling shoes, but what? You want to go to law school? Okay, so maybe what we'll do is buy a law firm and you can run it. And then we'll take the shoes and they've transitioned their business around the talents and the passions of the kids through the generation. They're worth 12 times more than anyone else in the family. It's been remarkable. And then I have cousins where I'm the one, and I always have to admit this, that said, no, I don't want the family business. I want to go be a therapist, who knew? And my cousins went in. And out of 9 male cousins, 7 are in a family business. Out of the 7, I would say 2 are thriving. They've all done really well. But 2 are just like the most amazing men. And the rest are sort of hollow and angry, a little addicted, 3rd marriage. Poor baby. What did you really want to do? or they made the money and then they went and became a pilot because that's really what they wanted to do, but they do it as a hobby. So the idea is, how do you chase the passion in the kids and adjust the business? But how do you also respect what is there? So it's everyone listening to each other at a certain age. I would vote for anything after middle age for the kids. Anyone below that is going to be a little too narcissistic. So 36, 38, 40 for women, 43, 44, 45 for men. That's the beginning of that conversation if you're lucky enough that your parents live that long. But you really should be practicing that when the kids are 9. You acted badly, go to your room. Now come to your room and say, so tell me again why you did that? Someone said, there's a brother and sister who don't like each other, we have to mediate that. And it's like, no, you don't. Why don't you just ask them why they don't like each other? There's probably really good reasons. So I wouldn't be pushing them to get together yet. Let's figure out what the original hurt is. And probably who else is involved who's not sitting in the room with them. Because mom or Aunt Lucy or dad or someone pitted them against each other their whole life. So we'll go there, but let's just make sense of it, not change it. That's respecting both generations. Dad doesn't want to leave his office. He's 80 years old. He has a business plan, this is a true story, of 15 years and he's in the center of it. Really? It's like, oh my God. But then going to him and going, why? And spending 3 hours and you get through all the financial and all that stuff and then you go, no, really, why? And he starts to cry. Because if I quit work, I'll die like my dad. It's like, oh, there it is. Okay, well then let's not quit work. That's good, but you don't have to be doing this. And the question is, do you really want to be doing what you're doing at the pace you're doing it and then drop dead? If you do, great. If you don't, you better start now. Because I would say half of the people in this room that are working in a family business all the time, and you're anywhere over 65, and you can't imagine yourself retiring, do not have a life. Go get a life. Then you can love your work, and you can work until you're 90. But what else should you be doing? I mean, I have to tell you, it's 2 years ago I sold my practice, I do my family business stuff, we still run around doing all of this, but it's so weird to be Wednesday at 2 o'clock in my house. And I'll sit at a book and someone goes by and I go, I'll be up in a minute, I'm just reading. And they just laugh at me because it's like, what do I do at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday? Oh my God, who am I if I'm not working? And it's like, I have to learn, it's been 2 years, it still makes me crazy. I should be like doing something. I should be producing because I'm a man and I need to get out. It's like, oh, lie down, stop. And everyone in this room has part of that that's older. You guys will get there, it's fine. All right, where are we on time? Because I want to open this up to questions. 40 more. Great, good. Can't be 40. Oh, 40 since I started. So 5 more minutes and I'll open. Okay. I thought, geez, this hour is going on forever. I mean, I love you, but Jesus, we're so connected. Let's keep going. Okay. So I think that, again, if you look at what are the primary arguments in family businesses, they're the argument between the child who is trying to be their own differentiated human being and be an adult, and the parent who knows how the system works and values it and is terrified of their own death. I always say succession is about opportunity for the younger generation and death for the older ones. And there's no other dynamic that really you can go, well, I'm going to live for 104. Well, yeah, but you're still going to die at the end of that. So can we not talk about, are you going to die? So when the kid says, I want the business and it's so great, it's like dancing on your parents' grave, for God's sakes. Could you lighten the hell up? Plus, we're not sure you're really good enough to do it yet. But could you at least be somewhat sensitive? But don't be overly sensitive and never bring up his death. It's like I have as many clients that say, I really want to sit with the kids and talk about the will. And the kids won't do it. It's like, well, the kids want you to stay 35. I mean, what is this? You're not going to die if we don't talk about the will. Which is a really tough one. And I've said this last time I was here, the thing we do in our firm is we have the kids do the will. We have the kids do the trusts. Why are the parents doing them? They're going to be dead. They don't have to live with it. The kids do. So say, here's the money. When they're like 40, here's the money, this is what it's going to look like. Now go do a will that you can all live with. That may take 2 years. Come back and show it to us, and we can approve or not approve it. But why are we trying to make you all happy from top down when you're the ones living with it? And everyone's head blows off their shoulders, and oh my God, that's telling them about the money. It's what I've always said as a therapist. When you're a therapist, you sit in the office and people tell you the most intimate details of their sex life and their fantasy life, and you go, so how much are you worth? Well, why would you ask a question like that? But that's so intimate, my God. And I'm always amazed with advisors that work with money, because you're working with, for men, the most intimate piece of information they have. And then the big thing about succession and then legacy and planning and all of that is if you're, $100 million family and there's 7 kids, and they've been raised in a $100 million home, and in that family and that identity, and then you spend a third of that, and then taxes, and then they divide it 7 ways, they become a $3 million kid, and they wonder where all the money went. Or the thought, which I think I said here last time as well, is that studies that show that kids with money, not poor kids, know exactly what you're worth. We only have $6 in the bank, we can't buy that loaf of bread. Once you get to middle to upper middle class to rich, kids get removed from the money. They don't have any sense of what you have. So they say, don't ever tell your kids how much you're worth. Well, yeah, that's true if they're 11, okay? But if they're 25, 30, and they don't know what the family assets are, what they find is that kids, when they say, so how much is Dennis worth? And Dennis is worth $100 million, which I'm sure he is. His kids will say he's worth $200 million. They double the amount because kids idolize their parents. And if we're rich, and you're as wonderful as I know you are, you have to be really rich. And they find that the kids will go above what the parents actually have. And then the estate gets divided up, and they go, what the hell? I thought we were worth $200 million, we're only worth $100. Then I had to share with all these people, and now I'm only worth $20. Where did all the money go? By the way, Dad, you're a big loser because you were supposed to be worth $200 and you only left me $7, and how am I going to live off of $7 million? It's like, really? But it's this amazing dynamic in families where kids are kids, and you have to raise them out of that. And the heroic part is you have to raise them out of that at a time where everyone in this room over 65 or 60 even is facing their own death. There's nothing more heroic. We need to talk about the future when I'm not going to be there. And most people aren't healthy enough to do that. It terrifies them. And that upper generation just stops the whole process. And then we wonder why succession plans don't work. And then people go in and try to do all the numbers and all, and in the Mertz's family, if that mother decides that Penelope, who she put through school till she was 40, and no one's told Doolittle that he's not that smart, they'll probably give him the business. They'll probably sell the business, even though they can't afford to sell those kids the business. But everyone's in denial, and that family dynamic of let's take care of the kids and at any cost and not let them grow up may go into how they end their business. And then everybody will starve to death. But those dynamics are incredibly powerful. So what it comes down to is healthy parents, healthy kids, the ability to be self-reflective, the ability to be vulnerable, know you only have a limited number of summers left. I have 11, if I'm lucky. So, now I may live to 95, bless my little heart, I hope I do, but I only have 11 statistically. So I'll go with that, and then the rest will be a bonus. But I don't want to pretend that I'm 55 and I have 40 more years like that idiot woman who thinks she has a long life and she's 66. It's like, no, you don't. No, you don't. All right? So you have to talk about real things. You have to be brave as the upper generation, and you have to raise your kids to join you in adulthood, not as equals, but as adults. And if you do all that, easy, if you do all that, your business will thrive, your kids will thrive, they'll remember you in a loving way. You hold on until you drop, I'll guarantee you what your legacy is going to be. It's not going to be pretty. And it doesn't matter how much you made, it doesn't matter what widget you designed, your whole legacy will be he never let go, and look at the losers he left behind. And they will hate you for it. It's like, don't go there. Ebenezer actually was redeemed. So keep that in mind. So that's it. I'm going to stop talking. And I'd love to hear anything that you thought about. And connect it back to Dennis's, and Dennis is still here, and anything about the psychological part? Yeah.
I would like to talk more about the permeability of the person.
Permeability is the ability, sorry, you're right. I did sort of talk about it, I didn't label it. Permeability is the ability to go to someone and say, Dad, I want to talk to you about X. And Dad says, okay, talk to me. I'll listen. I may not agree, and but I won't be disrespectful to you because he's supposed to be differentiated. The ability to stand apart from one's parent or child with empathy, not just standing apart. So if I go to my dad or my son comes to me, they have to be trusting that we can actually hear each other without immediate judgment or rejection. That's all we're talking about. And this whole notion of trust, makes my head blow off my shoulders. If you don't trust your kids, who the hell raised your kids? Like you say, gee, if I give this money, my kid will run off with it, and if I need it, they won't give it back. Oh my God, who did you raise? Who's the influence here? And what do you need to do? I mean, aren't these sort of a reflection of you? And they don't get that. They always feel like someone else raised their kids. It's like, and usually dad goes, well, I wasn't home, it's her fault, But, it's like, damn, yeah. So just the permeability that people will actually listen, both sides. And it is lower generation as much. Lower generation will stop their parents from growing. I had to hug my father, and I was a therapist, so it was one of our little exercises in the 60s, made him crazy. I had to hug him about 30 times to get him to learn to hug me and then not pat. Quit patting me, just hold me for a minute. It's like, well, that took about 4 years. But I had to do it. I had to teach him that because he was too scared to do it. So it's 100 things back and forth. It's not just, what else? This is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Have you depressed some of you? No, but see, the thing is, don't waste your time. Now's the time to savor every moment. Now's the time to grab your, She's not dead. She's going to be dead. She's not dead now. Look at her. She's amazing. But see, it's again, if you're going to be dead in 10 years, grab your daughter and go to Paris. Sit down with your grandchild and talk to them. Do something financially to help somebody in your family. Do something because you don't have time to waste. Learn how to cane a chair. You can't do that 10 years from now. You're going to be dead. Do it now. So savor the moment. It can be very fun. It does have that overshadowing of because there's no 4th chapter. But I can't take that away. But I'm tired of people pretending it's not there because they waste the latter third of their life. They just waste it. And I had a guy I worked with who dropped dead at his desk, always saying he was going to do with his kids. And he was 74 and never retired, left 3 of the angriest kids who were just furious with him that he did that. And that was 20 years ago. And I looked and went, wow, that's not the way to go. Yeah.
Can you offer one tidbit on how to reverse the cycle for the individual who is at that point, doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to face the kids, doesn't want to have the real discussion? I mean, is there...
Well, part of it is the bravery of the collective. Not one member of the family can do it. Okay, so we'll go with men because this is us guys, sorry. So if your dad doesn't want to talk about anything and you keep pushing, now as a woman, and that's the other thing in family businesses, women have a lot more power with their dads than sons do because you compete with your son. Men compete with each other. Men have been taught to compete with anyone with a penis. So if it happens to be your son, you'll compete with him in subtle ways, but you'll still compete. Daughters are able to go, Dad, you're an asshole, and Dad will laugh and say, what? If your son says it, you'll punch him. So it's like daughters already have an avenue. But it's like an intervention for addiction. Don't ever do it alone if you don't have to. So you get you and your sister, and no matter how much Dad goes, I don't talk about feelings, and you're suddenly 12 and you run to your room. The amazing thing is to watch the grown woman, I've had this a million times, or a male, when Dad goes, I don't talk about feelings. I go, you're such a knucklehead. Talk about your feelings, what? And he storms out of the room, and then he comes back. So talk about your feelings. And don't back away and regress. because the dynamic is between you. It's not dad not wanting to talk about his feelings. Dad's not safe enough to talk about his feelings. And every time you go away, you tell him it's not safe. It's like a child who's afraid of the dark and you go, oh my God, and you get all nuts. Versus going, it's fine, knock it off. We're going to deal with what's going on. You're treating your dad like an infant. So you have to intervene in a loving way, but a consistent way. You can't do that if you're feeling you're 15. So whatever age you are, that's the age you're going to go after him. And he's just a guy. He's afraid. The big thing with men is men will hide under power. It's vulnerability. Men abuse not because of power. Men abuse because they're terrified of losing. All the recent stuff on abuse with men. Most of the studies were done by men. Women are now in the field. Do you know that just 3 years ago was the first major study where anyone asked a man officially, why do you beat your wife? They just assumed they knew. And he said, well, if I don't, she'll leave me. Well, what do you mean? And then how many of these men have been victims? So it's out of vulnerability. It's still horrible and terrible and should be punished. But it's men will bark when they're feeling frightened. That's what we do. When men are anxious and depressed, we don't curl up in a ball and cry. We will yell at you. So you assume it's about power when it's about vulnerability. So dad goes, I don't want to talk about feelings. Well, why not? Are you frightened about feelings? And he'll hate you for that. But if you keep coming back, you'll get in. If you don't, he may have to die, never opening up, but make sure you do that with your mom, your brother, your husband, do it with other people in your life. He's a lost cause. I'm very sorry, but not everyone survives. But if I think it's a dynamic between the generations. I don't think it's the upper generation alone. We don't allow them to grow up. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I love your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
About 4 years ago, I did a TED Talk on something very similar because I've almost been killed so many times, so I kept trying. Seriously.
Wait, what do you mean? You've been...
Well, I was in
Oh, literally?
armed robbery. The guy was going to kill me.
Oh, God.
Mountain climbing accident, motorcycle accident, on and on.
So he'll
I
teach you to
spent-
stay home, right?
I should stay.
Yeah, you should stay home.
But I started keeping track of my time, so as of today, I have, to my actual real table, 522 more Fridays. I'm out of it. So I know that.
There you go.
And it's a great thing to know, and it may go to 2,000.
Yeah.
I love knowing that, but I've got a whole 10 different TED Talks that deal with that issue.
Uh-huh.
And I spent a lot of time with my dad before he passed, and we went through those, and that was what opened him up to have
Absolutely.
that kind of conversation. So
Yeah.
if anybody want a copy of those videos or the TED
I'd love
Talks,
to,
I'd be
yeah.
happy to do it.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing, freeing thing.
Oh yeah, I've got 6 more books to read, 212 rainbows. I know.
There you go.
Guess what? They're gonna be great.
There you go.
They're gonna be awesome.
Now, you're a guy, so you have all that. The other thing is you also have 25 times of just sitting and doing nothing. Try just doing nothing. You don't have to see everything. It's like, is it okay if you don't see Paris before you die? Yeah, there's going to be places I won't see. It's all right. But what would be a tragedy for me? What would break my heart if I knew over the next 11 summers I didn't get to that? And 90% of those things are often about interaction, love, connection. And then we'll end with the way we started, which is you all work together because you love each other. The studies of families that work together, you don't talk personally, you talk less personally than people that don't because you're busy working. Because if you work together all day long, you go, yeah, I hang out with my mom all day. When was the last time you asked her how she was and grandma? And well, we don't. We just work together. So people in family businesses actually talk less than people who aren't in family businesses, but they're around each other. So when was the last time you had a personal, real thing conversation that took your breath away with your dad, your mom, your sister, your brother? How cool is that? And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I had a mother-in-law that used to go, I just have to speak my mind. And at the very beginning, we'd all sort of hold on to the table and she'd go, really, you're gonna wear that? Should be, nothing positive was gonna come after that. And 40 years later, she goes, I just have to speak my mind. And I got brave enough to go, okay, old woman, the next thing out of that mouth is going to be horrible. I would love it if you said, I just have to speak my mind. You're the most wonderful man in the world. So it can be positive. Let's talk doesn't mean we're going to bitch at each other. When was the last time you told your dad or your mom or your kid how much you love them and why? So if you're not sorry to go after you, if you're not the smartest bulb in the box to run a company, But you're just this amazing creative person who, when was the last time a parent said, you're the most creative woman I know? This is amazing. And let's talk about that. And let's build something in the business to honor that. Those are the conversations we don't have between generations. And they're a belief system, it's not a skill. Communication theory has a terrible outcome when you teach it as a skill. Everyone knows how to talk nice to each other. A monkey can do that for a bit. So if you teach someone how to be nice to each other, some dynamic's going to get in the way 3 weeks later and they're going to have the same stupid fight they always had. It's a belief system about being safe, the permeability, the respect. What is that in your families, and is that part of your legacy? And I'm hoping that is part of your legacy in your family, and then is that translated to your business? So in this family that's very loving with the Armstrongs, and then they go, we paid our employees 20% more. Very nice. That's a legacy piece. That's, you're kind to your daughter, therefore you're going to be kind to your workers. Because if you screw your workers, you're going to take it out on her. She's going to open up that will and find out that you left it to the cat. And she's going to hate your guts. So, okay, it's late. Thank you, guys.